All right, we can just get it going, and we'll see who floats in. We can just do a couple of quick introductions if you want. I'm Pat. I'm the head of the growth working group here at Inverse. Been with the DAO about 5 weeks, and am very busy on a whole range of things, partnerships, some new product activity, a little bit of marketing, and some other things too. So we've got a lot to do, but super exciting and just really glad to be here. I've come from a software biz dev, marketing, licensing background before coming to Inverse, and I was at the Index Co-op for a while and have done some other crypto projects and investing, which this week isn't my favorite thing to talk about, but other than that, that's me. Anybody else?
Hey guys, so if you don't know me, I'm the senior front-end developer for Inverse since the 1st of November this year. And before that, I was basically a full-stack developer for about 10 years in different kind of industries. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to tell us about who they are?
Yeah, sure. I'm Nebs. Not on the Inverse team, but I have been helping out with the most recent proposal. Been in crypto off and on since like 2013.
wow.
Been involved in a few different projects on various different roles, but most of what I've been doing is dev related. But yes, I can empathize with the investing aspect you mentioned earlier today, Pat. Yeah.
By the way, 2013 is old OOG.
Yeah, I first got into ASIC mining when I was in college.
Nice.
Like I still have the original Butterfly Labs jalapeno. It's more of a conversation piece than anything at this point.
Sure. Cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Well, it's only me left up on stage. Hello, Nakamomo. That's what I go by. I've been hey there. I've been working with Index Co-op as translator and audio engineer and general opinionator, like everyone else, and also Bankless, the DAO. I have some connections, or rather, some social connections there. Let's say, just good times. Here, I'm very interested in tokenomics and everything that's going on. I think this is, with a bit of activity, this place is it's just fantastic, I think.
All right. Okay, cool. So I'll just kind of roll through. I wanted to share a couple of updates about some proposals, and I hoped that we could kind of talk a little about this latest Inverse Plus proposal that went up last night for anyone who wants to talk about it, ask questions. And there's some other stuff we're doing on Notion. There's a couple of people who normally are participating in that. I don't see them here yet. And then we've got another design related thing I wanted to mention. So I'll just kind of jump into it. Last week we had sort of a flurry of discussion about Floki coming to Anchor and doing borrowing on Floki. And the process here is to put it on Governor Mills for an on-chain vote, and that's a 5-day process. And there was a bit of a glitch. I think it was on the front end, and it just has delayed us in getting that on-chain vote complete. So the 5-day process is sort of extended the point at which it would go live to December 20th, which, probably not the most ideal thing to launch this during, the few days before holiday season really kicks in. But I'm imagining that we're going to probably drop the marketing for this sometime on the 21st. And the Floki people are still very enthusiastic, and I see the Telegram and had some other parallel conversations. They're pretty stoked, and I guess that's that's the update there. But that's going forward, and it should be pretty exciting. And there's just a ton of interest on their part to come over and borrow against Floki. There's also a related announcement. I don't see a Karen here, but we've basically contracted with Chainlink for their pricing oracles, and didn't realize it, but for Wrapped ETH and Wrapped Bitcoin and a few other things on Anchor, we were using something else, I guess, for the oracles. So we actually went ahead and signed a deal with them a few weeks ago, and we had them create the Floki. Floki actually had them create the Chainlink oracle for Floki, and there's a separate activity going on with Chainlink, and it's not a major alliance or anything, but it's just another signal to the marketplace that we're working with Chainlink, and it seems like the Chainlink folks want to make a big deal out of it, and they'll do some marketing against it. So Karen is working on Medium posts, and I think there'll be some whatever social media and things like that around that. I don't know if it'll be next week, but it's coming up soon, and just wanted to mention that. A couple other proposals that are up there. Zeno's not here, but there's basically guidelines for how our delegate council is going to operate. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but it's pretty important, and I think that's going up for a vote here shortly. And then we're looking for members of our delegate council. We've only got 2 candidates, as I understand it, who have raised their hands so far. We need at least 5. So if you have any interest in sort of being part of the governance function here, we're looking for good people who can commit to about a year's worth of this. So it's reviewing proposals, discussing them, and basically representing a portion of Inverse holders rather than, calling everybody to get to a quorum and vote and so forth. For Ethereum on-chain voting, it's pretty expensive, and it's also hard, as probably many of you know, just to get a quorum in some of these things. So the delegate council is a good way to add some speed to this process, and I'm pretty happy that we're doing it, but we just need some more candidates for it. So if you have any questions, Noor or Zeno or me, I'm sure there's other people that you can talk to, but it's a pretty important function, and give it a go. There's another proposal coming, which is relevant to this team, which is a growth working group proposal. And now that Massis has done a great job getting Governor Mills working with Exinv, we can get that going hopefully sometime next week. And that gives us budget for contributor compensation. And some of you, like Carm in particular, have done a whole bunch of work this past month, and it's really helping. And we've got some others, and it's still kind of early here, and we don't really have a process, we don't really have a well-developed process for paying contributors, but I'm hoping to change that pretty soon. And this growth working group proposal hopefully gives us not just some funding, but it kind of gets us going down the path of how do we become more efficient at paying contributors, recognizing their contributions, and organizing different folks. Some folks just want to do a little bit, other people really want to get involved, and we just need to kind of get smarter about how we do that. And that's it for that. Anyone have any questions about what I've touched on so far?
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned Inverse Plus. Can you tell more about it, if you can?
Yeah. So that was my next
All right.
topic. Yeah, sure. So in the call last week, Noor brought up a pretty interesting concept, and we have two challenges as a DAO. One is liquidity for DOLA in different chains, and also liquidity for INV as well. But really, DOLA liquidity is something I'm personally running into. So, for example, when we're working with 1 or 2 projects over on Arbitrum, and they're pretty interested in putting DOLA lending into their apps. What we don't have is an AMM on Arbitrum right now, and we don't have liquidity out there on Arbitrum. So there has to be some way for people to, buy or sell their DOLA before interacting with those apps. So we have that now on Ethereum. We have it on Phantom with Spooky and Scream, but as we expand into other chains, we need more of that. So then we have other things like there's just not that many DOLA pairs out there. So as we're trying to make DOLA more popular, we have some work to do. There's also just sort of an operating budget thing that we need to kind of contend with, which is we don't really have a large operating budget for this DAO right now. But if we're going to scale, we really need to build the engineering team. We don't have anyone really full-time working on treasury or risk management. We need, more hands on developing the community. We've got marketing to do. There's a whole list of things that we need to kind of do if we're going to really build this to be a huge effort, to be a huge business. So we haven't really, I guess, allocated that kind of money. In my opinion, it's probably, if I were designing an operating budget for this, it's probably at least $2 or $3 million for the next 12 months to pay the kind of people we need. Solidity engineers don't come cheaply. Front-end engineers don't come cheaply. And we just need to be thinking in those terms. And right now, we either haven't diversified the treasury enough in that way, or we just haven't allocated the resources. So Noor came up really with the idea, well, what if we thought about inverse governance token a little bit differently? And instead of just, the default option here is just to emit more inverse governance tokens and inflate the currency. And that, all things being equal, causes the price to fall. But what if we structured inverse more as a rebasing token, where people who own inverse and who stake it get rebasing rewards, kind of like Ohm, and it also gives us an opportunity to finance new liquidity programs, kind of like the way Ohm does, but also creates an opportunity for us to generate additional capital for operating expenses. And then lastly, it's another vehicle for growing the size of our treasury in order to increase the amount of DOLA that we have available to lend. So it's I'll just speak for myself. There's other people on the call here who have been involved. My take is it's a pretty intriguing approach to solving a few different problems. And we see, for example, what's going on with Abracadabra and Wonderland. They're kind of sort of merging Time and MIM together. We've seen what Sparta, if you've seen that Ohm fork, and their collaboration or their coordination with Sparta Cadabra, they're kind of merging these things together. And I ultimately think what FEI and Rary are doing is sort of moving in the same direction. They're merging a money market and the stable coin together. So I think it's an interesting business model opportunity for us. There's a lot of modeling that is going on. Neb and Nakamomo are on right now. Noor's been involved as well. But we posted a 3-pager last night kind of summarizing it. If you haven't had a chance to look, I'd encourage you all to look at it. It could be extremely exciting for us, in my opinion. Anyway, that's the intro summary. Maybe somebody else would like to jump in or ask questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. One of the interesting pieces, and I think Noor was able to probably state this more eloquently than I could, but unlike Ohm and some of these other Ohm-like forks, Inverse has various products, right? And DOLA is integrated in almost all of them, right? So not only would Inverse become sort of this rebase token, but a lot of the revenue that we'd be receiving would be in DOLA, in basically be a full closed loop system where we're growing the treasury in respect to DOLA and other assets. But I think that's a big distinction between like Ohm and some of these other forks, is that Ohm doesn't have any control over DAI. They own DAI, but they don't have any direct control over those assets, or it's not part of their ecosystem, so to speak, right? So I think that's a huge kind of interesting takeaway from this is that the DAO actually has control over Dola, it has control over Inverse, whereas Ohm and some of these other forks don't. And speaking of that, we actually have a product. It's not just a rebase token, right? Like Inverse has several products, so just something to think about on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It really shines a light on the whole APY thing, because I think that Ohm and the Ohm forks, they really like justify a very high APY with the need for an influx of new people and capital and talent, which works obviously. Here, however, there is already stuff. We're not building for nothing, just like Neb said, and I think that's a huge advantage and could possibly make it feasible to have a lower APY, maybe a more sensible thing if we are to compare to a straight up Ohm fork. But there are also differences there. Like we're the idea of having Ohm being locked up by other Ohm forks is a very attractive idea for Ohmies, because they're the same principle as Klima. You take a certain type of asset off the market by locking it up as backing. But yeah, we can do it ourselves with the Dola. I think that's really cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think there was some discussion about rebasing the whole APY. Nakamomo just mentioned that's really to kind of get more eyes on the project, right? Like
Right.
like especially ohmies and a lot of people are interested in ohm type forks. A lot of them are sort of yield chasers, right? I mean, that's normal, that's natural. I think everyone does this, but it really kind of shines the light on Inverse in a way by having that high APY. But it should be mentioned that like the high APY in of itself, the rebasing does not directly generate revenue for the treasury at Inverse. It's really all the other mechanisms like the bonding, the fees we get, right? Just getting people into the Inverse ecosystem through the high APY. So it's sort of like a secondary to get people in the system so that we can generate revenue.
Right. Yeah, so there's quite a few projects out there that are doing maybe two of these pieces, and as far as I can tell, no one has combined all three of these yet. So Alchemix is offering a stable and what they call self-repaying loans, but they haven't combined it with a rebase token before. And I think it's pretty unique for us. And I think that when you combine this with the lowest cost of borrowing amongst other stables, I think it's pretty powerful. And Nebs, as you said, I think this will bring a lot of eyes to Inverse. And I think it'll be good for the price of Inverse, but I think it'll be long-term really good for the ability to generate revenue.
Yeah, exactly. Do we kind of want to go through some of the phases that we're thinking on how this is would be rolled out?
Yeah, sure. Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything before we do that? All right. Does somebody else run through those phases? I don't need to do it.
Yeah. So we had talked about obviously the difference between inverse and ohm and actually any of these other forks is, well, we're already established project, right? So the challenge was, how do we convert inverse, which is an existing token, um, into a rebase, right? And I think that was partly one of the more challenging pieces to this whole proposal was figuring out a way to ease into that without like having, you know, detrimental impacts to the current inverse price, and catching people off guard, giving people enough time to make that transition, and so on and so forth. So um, what essentially Nor came up with was to really increase. So the Treasury has what is about 30,000. Is that correct, Pat? Inverse.
Yes.
For basically for incentives. So basically the idea is we would use that to resupply the Olympus Pro bonds that we've that have been doing pretty well. And I don't know how long that will last for. I think it's what, a couple months, Pat, something like that,
Right.
based on so those would be resupplied, and then likely the staking rewards would be increased. I don't know that it's actually in the proposal what that ends up turning out to be, but um, so as soon as those the treasuries depleted essentially of those incentives, that's when we start um, essentially rebasing, minting new inv, right? And at that point, it gives people plenty of time to make sure they're staked, right? They've staked their inverse, so that they don't get diluted, obviously. Um, so that's sort of like the transition area. We kind of get like a little, sort of like a preview by just leveraging what we already have with Olympus Pro bonds, and leveraging what we already have in place with the X inverse staking, and then as once that inverse supply is gone, then we can actually just start minting and distributing rewards um, to stakers. So that's the general idea. Obviously, there's more details in the proposal itself, but at a high level, that's kind of how we're dealing with that transition. Is we already do give out inverse today to fund Olympus Pro bonds, but we're not minting any. Those are already existing in the treasury, and they're being sent over to Olympus Pro to fund that. So, anyways, that's the high level. Any questions on that?
Oh, sounds good. Um, there's something that we can do differently than Olympus because of the fact that well, we're the originator of Dola. So all Dola that comes into circulation, brings some revenue, and I think that a sliver of that revenue could be diverted to increase the backing of the new rebasing token, so that instead of just $1, for example, being in there, it's slowly increasing over time. This is because I'm bothered by the fact that there's no um, game theoretical gauge that brings value into the rebasing token necessarily over time. That has to be decided to be done and so on. And I think that without that, the whole this just gives me a lot more confidence in that kind of system if it has a natural increase in backing. And I don't think it would be detrimental to the DAO too much. Any opinions?
Yeah. Well, we looked at a couple different models. I think obviously the model on the proposal is I guess similar to own, but I also believe it's actually simpler to implement. And one of the Solidity devs would probably have to correct me on that, whether that's true or not. But this one's more based on circulating supply, whereas I think the other model I had come up with was based on revenue entirely. Now, I think the idea behind the circulating supply is it's sort of like a derivative in some ways of revenue, right? So like you can assume that if you have a higher circulating supply, that you probably also have higher revenue. So it's just easier to model that in some ways, I believe, than revenue directly.
Right.
Yeah, revenue would be a byproduct of a lot of things, a lot of factors, of course. But
Yeah.
the intention to fill it up and have a method to do it, I'd like to at least air that. That would be nice to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, one of the challenges I think a lot of stablecoins have is creating organic demand for the stable. And it's easy for people to borrow a stable, but creating reasons for them to own DOLA or to use it, it's not really obvious in many cases right now. So in theory, this is kind of a reason to promote DOLA or to use it. If you happen to own Inverse, DOLA becomes, again, in theory, it becomes your go-to stable coin. And the more people that use DOLA, the more your Inverse increases in value. Now, you could kind of say that to some extent for some of these other guys, but right now their business model isn't directly linked to the revenue generated by a stable. So Wonderland's not linked to MIM, borrowing revenue, etc. So I think this is pretty unique, and it might be part of the recipe for solving that organic demand challenge, which is across the board. Everyone has it.
Right. Yeah, I guess that is a good way to put it. Like Ohm, even if there's more DAI in circulation, Ohm doesn't benefit directly from that, right? They're not. It's not a direct.
Right.
Doesn't have a direct effect on them.
No, that's ideal actually to have it.
One other thing worth mentioning is actually already today, XINV rewards are on a per block basis, which is different, than say, Ohm, which is every three times a day, so every 8 hours or so. So I think that it actually kind of solves a few issues that some of these other rebase tokens have today, which is like things like rebase jumping. That kind of just goes out the window if you're rebasing at a per block level. So a lot of the figures in the proposal are based on, I think is it 6,400 times per day. It varies. Like the target block time's 15 seconds, but obviously day to day it will range. I think between like 6,600 and 6,400. So there is a possibility on some days you get more emissions than others, but that's just the nature of how that works.
We're at 63.97 today.
Right. So if for some reason we rebase 6,600 times in one day versus 6,400, then you should be happy because you just got more yield. Obviously that's factored in terms of the min and max APYs and stuff, but just something to keep in mind is you don't have to wait every 8 hours to get your rebase. It's constantly going to be rebasing. So I think that's pretty cool. There's not a whole lot of projects that do that either. I think the only one that comes to mind is I think it's like Invictus or something. They're on Solana, and they do something similar to that. Let's say Donuts is saying he can't hear. Can y'all hear me all right?
I hear you fine.
Okay.
Maybe try logging in and out, and maybe me saying it doesn't matter.
It doesn't show him in the listeners.
All right, I just
Yeah, maybe you should mention just a bit like there's been some attention to not upset or make it unnecessarily difficult for current stakers. Like no action needs to be taken there, other than maybe come home from Phantom if you want to stake your imp. Yeah, I'll be doing that.
Yeah. I think we should. Obviously this proposal has to get vetted and go through and stuff. So that's why we're discussing it. But definitely, like, if you're not staking, you know, I would certainly consider it heavily to start staking your inverse. I mean, you already do get rewards today, right? I think it's at like, was it 60% APY? I don't know what the APY is going to change after the proposal, like before we actually start rebasing, but um, just in general, I think it's two inverse holders benefit if they do just go ahead and stake. And you'll have, I think, at least based on the current timeline we have set here, a couple months, actually more than a couple months, to actually start staking, right? That's for the actual full release, but in terms of increasing rewards, like I would stake as soon as possible, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't. We're able to leverage the current XIM model right now. So in theory, as far as I know now, unless one of the Solidity devs, tells us otherwise, we shouldn't need to, migrate to a new contract or anything yet. So I'm not going to put that in stone because obviously I don't know.
Sure.
I just know that we are leveraging the existing XIM stuff we have in place today. So
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it was like spelled out, but like you said in the beginning, Pat, the idea is to get more economic, liberty for us to move as a DAO in the treasury and so on. So the method with which that would happen would be that like a small part of the minting would go to the DAO treasury, right? In much in the similar way as it would go to all stakers.
Yeah, DAO Treasury, some kind of operation account.
yep.
Yes, let's use the right
Yeah,
name.
we had talked about. I don't know that it's I don't know if it's in this version of the proposal, but it's something we definitely talked about. Is some of the emissions would would be redirected to some treasury, some wallet for operations, right? I don't know what that looks like, but
Yeah, and I'm just throwing this out there, but I just did a really quick back of the hand. What do we need to really build this up to $1 billion in DOLA, to have just, basic kind of organization that we would need? I'm going off, for example, comparing this to Index Co-op, where I've got some experience, and looking at other DAOs, and we are extremely lean as a DAO today. And it gets us somewhere, but if we really want to kind of scale this thing, there's just some must-have components like treasury that just got to be put in place. And in my opinion, we're going to need much more in the way of engineering capacity. So I would feel a lot better, I hope most of you would too, if we had some amount of stables set aside for, let's say, 24 months, so that if we go through some protracted bear market, we're not sitting here without runway to continue to operate the DAO and continue to build until a bear market goes away. So I don't know. I think it's something that's, as part of this proposal, probably needs to be fleshed out a tad bit more. And if you ask for too much and you don't use it, we can always put it back into Treasury. But my sense is it's, probably in the 2 to 3 million a year range, probably more in the second year, maybe not as much in the first year, but I think that's kind of what we need to be thinking about setting aside.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And
So
with the rebasing model, it makes that a lot more, I guess, fluid in a lot of ways. If those emissions are just kind of dripping into the whatever that ops wallet is, I think it makes it a lot easier,
right,
to project, anyways.
Yeah, depending on how much time passes and the rebases and the price and all that, it could turn out that that wallet would get a lot of inverse plus, and yeah, maybe we'd end up in a position where we have labeled it an ops wallet when it should be wider. But I don't know how strict that is. Maybe we can just rename it in that case.
Anybody else want to raise their hand and chime in on this? Or any other thoughts?
Well, good UI work there, Alien Tourist. I like to see that.
That's a good point. So I think, there's a 3-pager up there right now that kind of shows you what we're talking about, but to really have everyone get comfortable with it, I think it needs a lot more detail. So there's been a lot of talk this week about the rebasing rewards mechanism, and that takes, I think, some thoughtful study still. And we really haven't gotten into the details from an engineering standpoint. We've had some discussion a week ago about, what would it mean to alter the existing contract for Exin, and seems like it's a straight path, but something like this, it seems like it needs quite a lot of attention to detail and testing before it goes to mainnet. So in this 3-pager, there's a draft timeline where we take this 3-pager and then we start kind of gathering feedback starting last night, and then basically starting to turn this into a little bit of a requirements document, or get into some details about what exactly needs to change in Anchor, or what does the user interface requirement need to be in order to support this. And I think that's sort of a next step here, is to sort of flesh this out a little bit further. And I think then we're in a position to sort of throw this up there for, some kind of a formal consideration, vote, maybe put it on the forum. But I think if we're not going to do this, then it would be good to find out quickly so we don't burn too many cycles on it. But there's definitely a few people here who are pretty pumped about it. And I think if we're going to do it, then we should kind of get going on it.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that someone must have an opinion. It's a pretty hefty move. So please share your views.
Yeah, so KGB asked an interesting question. Is there any successful example of a rebase token other than Ohm? Jury's still out. I can only think of failures. So I think one thing worth like mentioning is a lot of these, like even Ohm itself, a lot of these are sort of like inflationary tokens, right? I think you'll realize in terms of what early on goals, Ohm has been a just amazing success. I mean, they were able to gobble up just tons of liquidity, and that's really like at the core of what we need to do. What Inverse needs to do is we need more liquidity. We need more revenue. So I don't think the long term goal of Inverse and even Ohm for that matter is to try and have these ridiculously high APYs. You know, like that's not clearly that's not sustainable. But I think it's really just to incentivize people to come look at the product, start using the product, and then that'll help us grow, right? Um, our and grow our liquidity. So in terms of like Ohm being success or failure, like yes, if you're looking at the price action right now, which I don't think is a very good metric of how Ohm is doing as a whole, um, it doesn't look good right now, but the entire market does not look great right now, if we're being quite honest. But in terms of how much liquidity they've been able to capture for in the short period they've been around is just incredible. So I can't speak to other all the other own forks out there, but there's a lot of copycats. So that says something about about that idea, right?
I'm reading the proposal document, and what I was thinking is maybe we should add on the document like a schema of all the flows, like the tokenomics and what goes where, like to get the picture easily, like in just at a glance,
Yeah,
You mean
that's a
like
good
user
idea.
flows?
Yeah, like I mean, a schema of all the tokenomics, basically, of the rebasing.
Like a flowchart, for example.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah, like explaining the staking, the rebasing, everything, basically.
Yeah, right now it's in math or concept talk, so that's a really good idea. If you look at most channels in Ohm's Discord, they have that pinned, which is fantastic.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we should need maybe something like this. Yeah, I think it will talk a lot more to people. It will be easier for people to like comprehend what the proposal will be about or how it will actually work. Like,
I had a picture and I shared it, and I don't think anybody liked it, so I better redo it. So,
wait, did I see this picture? I don't recall.
Early on, I wrote a picture. I agree completely with Massis. Pictures are excellent.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't think there was anything wrong with it.
I'm just kidding.
Actually.
There was no pictures. I wanted to keep the proposal to like 3 pages so people don't, get bored. But yeah.
Yeah, another thing about the rebase there, I was reading KGB's comment again, and it's not just inflating and spreading out rewards to everyone. That's not the whole picture. It also buys back Ohm and stops minting and all that kind of stuff. So there's another side to it. We just haven't seen it in action yet. Maybe SPA. I don't know if they have started buying back yet. They're approaching $1, Spartacus, and they are under their safe value. So that's really interesting to follow and see what's happening there, because technically it is an automated arbitrage system. Maybe there are like human pulleys to stop and start the different systems, but it's supposed to buy back at a certain point, and that point can be changed and is intended to change over time to increase. As volatility goes down, the buyback point should go up. Same with market cap. As that goes up, that all of these interact with each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did. I think Spartacus is the only one that I know where their actual backing value is higher than the market price, and it is a little bit bizarre to me. Like you mentioned the whole buyback concept, but I wonder, like, and this is maybe kind of off topic, but can the users actually redeem from the DAO directly, or can they only interact with the market? That's
No, they can redeem directly. I just don't know the exact circumstances yet. So
interesting.
yeah, they should go to the home forum or Discord is better.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
So a few weeks.
Yeah, another. Go ahead. Sorry.
Getting back to KGB's comment, which I think is a good one. A few weeks ago, I started mapping out our opportunities, either things that looked interesting to me or things Noor had already touched on. And a bunch of the stuff that Noor sent was actually ohm forks. So some of it's on the website, like Solar Beam. It's over on Moon River, Giza. I mean, there's a bunch of these things. But there are at least a couple hundred of these things out there. And I heard the other day it's more like 1,000. I don't know if that's accurate. But this is
There's a ton.
Another possible way of looking at this is that this is some kind of a trend, or this is some kind of a thing. And, you know, it's maybe not rational to just follow the crowd. I'm not saying we're following the crowd, but as a mechanism for building the treasury and for increasing DOLA demand, I think it's an interesting alternative to just emitting more inverse. And I think I'm personally not a huge fan of that. I know lots of DAOs do that, but I'm not such a big fan. And to me, this is really a more rational way to create emissions. I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as there is a push and pull where we can inflate and deflate, we're all good. Like we're gonna need that flexibility, I believe. Maybe it would have been good if we had that all along, wouldn't it? So yeah, say you have a national rebasing token. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go, because people don't think about their tokens that way in their wallet. But it would probably be a more harmonious way of increasing and decreasing money supply.
Yeah, I think it's well, we've talked a lot about rebasing, but I mean KGB. I'm not sure if we were clear. I mean, the bonding is a huge part of this going forward. You know, that's really where we, at least initially, would probably get a good chunk of our revenue, as we do today with Olympus Pro that is doing well. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that the bonds are the key to this whole thing. Like if Ohm had no bonding, they would be dead. I mean, in my opinion, they would not have a product.
Not a chance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so in regards to like being able to pull back and some of the levers are a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? They're a little bit obtuse, like the rebasing rate and affects like the inflation, right? But then bonds in turn affect, depending on demand, obviously, and your discounts, and affect your revenue flow. So we've got levers to pull and modify as we see fit to alter that. Like I said, we had another model that was more directly revenue based, but again, I don't really know how feasible that model is in terms of getting it converted over and based on what we have today. And it was more like a high level general model of like, okay, if we had this much revenue and we want to print inverse, we had levers to control, okay, for every DOLA we print X amount of inverse, right? And based on, so we had like inflation rate, so you could probably transform a lot of the same ohm equations into that equivalence. It's just the levers aren't, the levers are a little like less clear. Like to me, like the rebase rate, like that's how much you're emitting out to other users, but it's also like if it's really high, if you're emitting more than the revenue you're taking in, then yeah, it's inflationary, right? The same thing could be said with bonds, right? The more discount you're giving, yes, you're getting revenue, but you're also inflating because you're giving bonders a bigger discount, right? And so bonds in a way can also dilute stakers if you're not careful. So there's a lot of mechanics that you have to balance out in this model.
Yeah, I agree. I started up with the 3-3, and then I took a closer look, and I realized, yeah, I'm being diluted by the bonders, and also by those who managed to borrow and increase their APY that way.
Yeah, the
I had
9-9ers.
yeah, I had some ideas. Yeah, I was trying to figure out a 10-10 strategy while borrowing and then bonding, but that was no good. However, I think it's possible to make these strategies automated inside a vault, especially because, well,
Mm.
we control the anchor, and if everyone has democratized access, then, like, first of all, we're on Ethereum, so a lot of people are cut out already, and to bond, you'd like a bigger amount because you want to stake it regularly, and that costs gas. So yeah, I think it would be nice to maybe long term make a vault for people to create a 4-4 strategy, which means that you're
That's
bonding.
interesting.
Yeah. So you could kind of stake your X. You stake your inv, then you stake your XInv, but that's maybe you just choose which way you stake it or something to avoid even more gas stuff. If this might be a tiny thing, but like Spartacus has done a really good thing with having their bonds keep rebasing. So in normal life, normal original ohm, the bonds, when you bond, you have locked tokens that vest, and they're just regular ohm, so they don't rebase. But Spartacus, they have as Spartacus, they're staked when they bond, which is really nice. You can sleep at night, don't have to go there all the time and
Oh, that's
fiddle
cool.
with it. Things like this is, of course, minute if we're considering things like, is this a good idea at all? I think maybe we should stay with the wider angle so far right now.
I agree, but we can add sort of a section on the next version of this, which is other feature set ideas that we're potentially considering for future, future iterations of this. And I just don't know how much we can digest in how much time from an engineering standpoint. But I think some of this is pretty mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Inverse as a whole is way better positioned to use these mechanics than most of the forks out there. I mean, literally 90% of the forks are just verbatim ohm forks,
Right.
right? And they don't really have a product, and yet they still are able to gobble up tons of liquidity.
Right.
So, you know,
That's what I see.
Very good point. Yeah, absolutely. And KGB Air, another comment. Yeah, it says, among other things, I'm just not sure I see the big advantage of you rebasing over the more proven Wi-Fi model, or Wi-Fi of mint, emit, buy back with potentially a burn feature out there. And I'm not like a huge fan of burn and buybacks, even though I recognize that they of course can be used well. But it can present opportunities for people in the know to exit when burns happen and when buybacks happen, which is like, that's not really what they're, well, they can be intended for that, but usually they're not they're not marketed that way. Usually people say
yeah,
that. Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
wonder. I don't know how often Wi-Fi does those. I'd be interested to see because like I'd be to Nakamomo's point. Like I feel like that would be rife for front running when they know something's if they're about to mint or do a buyback whatever they could front run it. So I'm just curious like the difference with the rebase model, especially with ours on like ohms is It's per block, so there's not really a whole lot of people can do to try and rebase jump or manipulate it. They're just gonna waste gas. So
Yeah, but if we would utilize some other model that was more like Wi-Fi, then that might be
yeah,
an issue. But I don't know how to circumvent it. I'm not like expert on front running, so.
Can someone kind of give a 1 or 2 paragraph on the point he made about doing this with inverse vaults?
Right.
I think it
Yeah.
was talking about what Nakamomo was talking about earlier.
Yeah, the 2 major ideas of that. Like, first is to use part of the rebase that you get personally and divert it into a DCA vault to maintain a coherent narrative with the original utility that was here, and also to have a vault where you can choose to stake your X in, for example. Like, maybe that's the only way to do it. Maybe that's an option, and the vault would bond if we need bonds. And then you would get a small discount on your inverse, meaning you would increase your APY effectively. The user experience would be, I put my money in there, I don't get a discount immediately, but I rebase quicker because the vault it keeps bonding. And it's good because we need to be able to control how much is being bonded. If there's little demand, we can up this thing. If there's too much, if we don't need more assets into the treasury, or if we don't want to discount more inverse, we just, yeah, turn it off or dial it down.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, if you have tons and tons and tons of inverse, maybe you can just pay someone to make an automatic, compounder for you. You don't have to bother about this, but for the rest of us, it's nice to have a place that, yeah, it kind of optimizes so everyone has the chance to enter on equal terms, which in the sense they have now, but they have different options depending on their wallet size. I think it could be cool for newcomers.
Yeah, so that would fall into the feature set roadmap section, I think.
Sure, yeah. And it's an add-on to the whole idea of rebasing in the first place. Like, this would be, I've spoken to people in different protocols about this, and it has been picked up, not necessarily from me, but it's something that's on a lot of people's minds. So maybe it's better to think of it as something to tack on, and maybe not the engineering lift we want to start with. But it depends. If we have an ohm specific Solidity dev, like, yeah, man, I've been thinking about that for weeks, let's do it, then sure. How are we with that, by the way? How specialized is ohm forking? I understand you have some insight into other forks, but not coding. Nebs, do we know if anyone here has been looking at the ohm code?
Nebs had to jump.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, well.
We can mark that as a question mark.
Yes.
Well, maybe if we partner with Concave, maybe someone over there can help us over the whole rebasing stuff and how that would work on the code parts. Like,
Yes.
we can talk to a dev from Concave or OMA about that. That would be great.
Yeah, we have the own bonds. We seem to have a cordial atmosphere between the protocols, so that should be entirely possible if we can get some attention.
Yeah.
We're working on a treasury deal right now with. We had a really good call this week, and probably January to get it done. But yeah, it's very friendly.
Awesome.
They did a big deal with Frax earlier this year, so I want to kind of at least get to that sort of level with them. I think we're getting close.
Yes. for anyone who sees my name here and thinking that that guy's new, who's that guy? Then yeah, I'm new. You'll find out. I can't really do anything about that yet. Trust builds over time, but yeah, I came in very active right away, pretty much, and I realized that yeah, some time needs to pass, and it will. Happy holidays.
Yeah. So if you've got comments on this, please add them to the Discord or put them on the document if you like, or DM me or anybody. But we would love to get some more eyes on this. So KGB, if you have any interest in this, we need some more brains kind of debating this and bulletproofing it, whatever, steel manning it. But I would like to sort of convert this into basically a requirements document that it gets to a point that we could give it to Massis and Noor and say, here, this is kind of what we want to see built. And they can take it and say, okay, it's fairly clear what we're trying to do. And it's basically kind of a recipe for engineering. But I think that's going to be important just not only for engineering, but for us to kind of think through all the various edge cases or angles that we anticipate before taking a step. So unless anybody else has anything, there's a couple other things I just want to mention. We have a Notion board for the growth working group, and Carm's been very active in cranking stuff out. Alex, I think Karen's on there. We need a few more folks. There's a bunch of stuff. It's partnership related, but there's some basic marketing and just comm stuff that really just needs to be tended to. And for example, we needed someone to build a Medium post for Floki and for Chainlink, and Karen's working on that. And we are going to, fund this kind of stuff out of the growth working group budget. So if you're interested, that's how we're tracking it. And if you don't have access, just DM me and I'll get you access. Just need an email address. And then, like for example, one of the things that's out there that we're going to kind of move out on very shortly here is a new icon for DOLA. So a big objective is to get DOLA out there everywhere, but for some reason we have an anchor for the DOLA icon, which is not very descriptive, and I don't think it's the right icon. It's named after another product of ours, Anchor. So we're going to have a design contest for a new icon for DOLA, and that'll be up shortly. But that's been on the Notion board, and I'm hoping, I don't know if Donuts is still on this call, but I was hoping to get Donuts to help. And maybe, I don't know, anybody else who wants to, but we could definitely use some help to take a look at all the icon submissions that come in. We'll probably get quite a few, and then kind of help us decide how to pick a winner. So anyway, I just want to let you know about that, and I think that's pretty much all. I think next Friday is right up against the holidays, so unless anyone objects, I'm going to say we skip it next Friday, or maybe we could do it at a different time next week, depending on how things are going. But we should have the Floki announcement out next week, and it should be a little bit wild around here. We should be seeing some new faces. And then I personally think this Inverse Plus proposal is going to be pretty interesting to a lot of folks. And I think it's a neat next step for us as a DAO. We have a lot of work to do, but I think it's one of those things that could just bring just a ton of excitement, and it could really just electrify things.
Absolutely. Super exciting, of course. Yeah, thanks for today.
No problem. Anybody else? Anything? Going once? All right. Thanks so much, everybody. And have a great weekend. And if I don't hear from you or talk to you, enjoy your holidays. But we're going to keep cranking next week, all through the holidays too. So look forward to great things coming up.
Yeah, thanks guys for all the infos on Inverse Plus.
Yeah, awesome.
Cheers, everyone.
All right, ciao.
Cheers. Bye.